Hi, my name is Anne-Marie and I'm a dietitian here at Regional Hospital in Mullingar. So today is the first of the nutrition sessions of your cardiac rehab program. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. There we go. So nutrition, it can be confusing, and it can be even more so after having a cardiac event. It seems like advice is always changing, and it can be difficult to find the correct information. Today, what we're going to do is go through the most up-to-date and evidence-based information that we have on diet and cardiovascular health. So as dietitians and nutritionists, we've moved away from looking at specific nutrients and we look at diets in general. You may have heard of the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet is an eating pattern and it's been found to be very beneficial for our health in general, but particularly beneficial to our heart health. It's based on unsaturated fats, it's based on lots of fresh produce and less processed foods. So we're going to look at the components of a Mediterranean diet and what foods to eat more of and what foods to eat less of to have a Mediterranean diet which is beneficial for your heart health. So the first thing that we're going to look at are fruit and veg. So fruit and vegetables have consistently been found to be beneficial for our health and for our heart health. They contain vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, and these can reduce inflammation. And inflammation is something that is associated with atherosclerosis or a buildup of plaque in the arteries. Fruit and vegetables also contain soluble fiber, and that can help to reduce LDL or your bad cholesterol. So we need to have between 5 and 7 portions per day, and this can be fresh, frozen, dried, or tinned. So if you think about it, if we eat about 6 times per day, so 3 meals and 3 snacks, then we do need to consider eating fruit or veg at each sitting or each eating occasion. So for fruits, do try and add fruit to cereal, add fruit to porridge, add it to yogurt, have stewed fruit, have fruit salad for dessert. Make sure your fruit bowl is full of fruit so that there's plenty of opportunities to have fruit as snacks throughout the day. For your vegetables, do make sure that half of your plate is covered with vegetables, and so non-starchy vegetables. So by that we mean any vegetables that aren't potato. Do try and snack on things like vegetable sticks, celery sticks, carrot sticks, have side salads with your lunches, with your dinners, and try and have homemade vegetable soup, as that can be a great way of getting some extra vegetables into your diet. And we do know from research that any additional portion of fruit and veg that you get into your diet does give you benefit, even if you're not reaching the 5 or 7 portions per day. I just want to talk about fruit sugars for a minute. So fruit contains natural sugars, and that's sugar within the structure of the cell of the fruit, and this is called intrinsic sugar. So this type of sugar, it's not detrimental to your health, and it does not need to be limited or avoided. Fruit juices, however, these do contain free sugars, and these should be limited to a small 150 ml glass of fruit juice once a day, or if you can, avoid fruit juice altogether and just eat the whole fruit, because you'll be getting all the fiber in the fruit if you do. For people with type 2 diabetes, fruit can cause blood glucose levels to rise. So for that reason, it is recommended not to have multiple pieces of fruit at one time. Just have one portion at a time. So by a portion, it's generally what you can hold in a cupped hand. So a handful of berries, 1 apple, 1 orange, 1 pear, 2 smaller fruits, so 2 mandarins or 2 kiwis. So just try and spread your fruit intake across the whole day if you do have diabetes. So fish is a key part of the Mediterranean diet. We should have fish in our diet at least twice a week, and one of those times should be oily fish. So fish has iodine, has selenium, it's a good source of protein, and it's low in saturated fat. And saturated fat is the bad fat, that's the fat that we want to reduce in our diet. So eating fish in place of processed meats or in place of red meat, it can help to reduce our saturated fat intake. An oily fish contains a fat called omega-3, which is an unsaturated fat, and that has been proven to reduce risk of cardiovascular disease. Oily fish include salmon, trout, herring, and mackerel. Fresh, frozen, and tinned fish, they're all absolutely fine to use. So for example, you could have tinned tuna on a baked potato, you could have sardines on toast, you could have frozen salmon cooked in the oven with potatoes or with pasta and vegetables for dinner. So any way is good. Moving on to nuts. So nuts are an important component of the Mediterranean diet. And there actually have been a lot of studies done on nuts and nut consumptions and our cardiovascular disease risk. And we know that nuts can help reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease. Nuts contain good fats. They contain unsaturated fats, which can help to lower LDL cholesterol. You can think about adding chopped nuts to porridge, to yogurt, having a handful of nuts as snacks, using whole nut butters on oatcakes or on crackers. These can all increase your nut intake. And despite being high in calories, studies have shown that long-term nut consumption does not promote weight gain. So there's no limits on nuts. The next thing I want to talk to you about is dairy. So there has been research into dairy products and heart health, and they have shown that dairy products either have a neutral effect or a beneficial effect on our heart health. There is some debate on whether we should recommend full fat or low fat dairy. Some studies have shown that reduced fat milk, yogurt and cheese are healthier, and others have shown that full fat options are healthier. So there is a bit of debate between which we recommend. Milk, yogurt and cheese can be eaten as part of a heart healthy diet, but we know in a heart healthy diet we want most of the fat to come from fish and from nuts and from seeds and from healthy oils. We know that in Ireland, dairy contributes to 20% of our overall saturated fat intake. And so for that reason, we recommend that you choose low-fat dairy products for heart health here in Ireland. So that's low-fat yogurt, low-fat milk and low-fat cheese. So do include them in your diet for heart health. The next thing we want to move on to are oats and whole grains. Again, these are part of the Mediterranean diet and they have been shown to be beneficial for our heart. Oats contain a substance called beta-glucan, and this can lower our LDL cholesterol. So having porridge at breakfast or Oatabix or having oatcakes, these are good ways of getting oats into your diet to help reduce the cholesterol levels. Whole grains and having a high fiber diet, we know they are cardioprotective, so they're protecting your heart. So having brown breads instead of white, brown rice, brown pasta, brown cereals, these can all contribute to a heart healthy diet. Just bear in mind the portion sizes of these foods. So about 2 slices of bread is fine at a meal, 2 potatoes, a cup of cooked rice or cooked pasta. So this is all what is considered to be a portion size. Just really be mindful of these starchy carbohydrate foods if you do have type 2 diabetes, as excessive amounts of these can cause rises in blood glucose levels. Next, what we want to talk about are fats and oils and spreads. So we know that one of the strongest points of evidence for diet and cardiovascular disease is to replace the saturated fat with unsaturated fats. So saturated fats, these tend to come from animal sources. So they're your butter, your lard, your dripping, your suet. Coconut oil actually is a saturated fat, and palm oil, even though they aren't animal-based. But we want to reduce these types of fat in the diet, and we want to replace them with unsaturated fat. So unsaturated fats are generally from plant sources. So things like olive oil, rapeseed oil, vegetable oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, nut and seed oils like sesame or walnut oil, and avocado oil. So using these oils are better in your diet to replace the saturated fat with unsaturated fat. So for your cooking oil, for example, you could use rapeseed oil. And spreading on bread, if you are using butter, make sure you use it sparingly, or switch to a low fat or a sunflower or vegetable based spread. So looking at meat, so as we mentioned previously there, animal products tend to be high in saturated fat. So for that reason, we want to swap out some of the red meat in our diet and replace it with protein, which is lower in fat. So things like chicken, turkey, poultry, and fish, this can make a really big difference to our saturated fat intake. We don't say that you have to cut out red meat altogether, but when you are having red meat, try to have leaner cuts and try not to have red meat every day in the diet. Processed meats such as sausages, burgers, puddings, kebabs, these are very high in fat and particularly saturated fat. So we do try to limit these, if not avoid them completely when possible. And what we do want you to eat more of, and what is part of a Mediterranean diet, is to eat more plant protein. So eat more beans, peas, and lentils. So adding peas, beans, and lentils to soups and stews and different kinds of dishes can be very helpful. So for example, if you have beans on toast for your lunch instead of sausages and bread, that's reduced your saturated fat intake and added more plant protein into your diet and added more soluble fiber. If you were having spaghetti bolognese or chili con carne, adding in kidney beans or cannoli beans or chickpeas into these dishes, it can help to bulk out these dishes so that when you were eating a portion of them, you have less fat content and more fiber content. Kidney beans, cannelloni beans, chickpeas, they are really quite hearty and quite filling, so do try them. Lentils are another good thing to add into soups and to stews. And both beans and lentils, they have a really long shelf life as they are tinned and dried and they are quite cheap. So they're really good to try out. Hummus is also a good thing to have in your fridge. So it's a dip. You could dip some carrot sticks or some celery or some crackers into hummus and it is a good snack. It's made from chickpeas. So it has some plant protein and some soluble fiber in there too. Okay, so moving on to some of the foods that we want you to eat less of. So your takeaways, desserts, chocolate, biscuits, cakes, and crisps. So there's no recommended amount of these in our diet because we don't have a requirement for them. We don't need these in our diet for health. We would generally say to try and limit them to about once or twice per week and use your own judgment on how much you're having these foods. So for example, if you had a takeaway once a week and a dessert once a week and chocolate once a week and a biscuit once a week and cakes and crisps once a week, well, you probably ended up having something every day of that week. So really do be cautious about how often these are occurring in our diet. These foods, they tend to be high in fat. They tend to be high in saturated fat, which is the fat we're trying to reduce. And they also tend to be high in trans fats. Trans fats are particularly bad because these can rise our LDLs, these can rise our bad cholesterol while lowering our HDL or our good cholesterol. So really as little as often for these foods as possible. And I just want to speak about takeaways for a minute. So takeaways can be called fast food, but I really want you to think about other types of fast food before you go for a takeaway. So beans on toast, eggs on toast. If you had chicken breast in the oven, it will take 30 or 40 minutes depending on the size. You can get baby potatoes that are microwaved in 7 minutes. A fish fillet in the oven could take about 30 minutes. Rice and pasta is boiled in 13 minutes. So takeaways and fast foods, they don't have to mean the same things. You can have fast food that is healthy. So do try and think outside the box for these types of dinners. But word on salt. So in Ireland, we eat too much salt in general. Without adding salt to our meals, most of us will eat enough salt through the food that we eat day to day. So instead of adding salt to your meals at the table or during cooking, try and add pepper or garlic, onion or spices. So do have a look at the spice racks in your houses. At the very least, don't add salt on autopilot to your meals before you even taste them. Products that are high in salt tend to be packet soups, gravies, bacon, sausages, ham, cheese, smoked fish, salted nuts and crisps. So do try and limit these. But really they are all the processed foods. If you go back to the Mediterranean diet, which is a lot of unprocessed foods, these will be low in salt in general. Looking at alcohol, so we do say for alcohol for women can have up to 11 standard drinks per week, and for men up to 17 standard drinks per week. So a pint is 2 standard drinks, a small glass of wine is 1 standard drink, and a pub measure is 1 standard drink. So you don't have to have alcohol in your diet. So these are upper limits, they're not targets. So if you don't drink alcohol, you don't need to start drinking alcohol. Alcohol really has a detrimental effect on our overall health in general. It can be particularly detrimental for our blood pressure. So if blood pressure is an issue for you, really do consider how much alcohol you are drinking. Just a note on the quality of our diet versus the quantity. So maybe for some of you here, you do need to think about weight loss. And it can be a lot to think about, how much you're eating and what you're eating. It can all be a lot to do. So what I do want you to do first and foremost is really look at the quality of your diet. So think about what we have gone through over the last few slides. Are you getting a lot of fruit and veg in your diet? Do you eat fish? Do you eat oily fish? Can you start putting fish into your diet? What about nuts and seeds? Are you eating nuts? Can we get some nut butters, some chopped nuts, some flaked nuts into your diet? What about oats and whole grains? Can we get that into your diet? What about lean meat, chicken, poultry, turkey? Can we get these kind of foods into your diet? Can we reduce the takeaways, reduce the processed foods and reduce the salt in your diet? So really think about the quality of your diet and what we want to get into it, what we want more of, and how we can be more aligned with a Mediterranean diet. So this was the first of the nutrition sessions in your cardiac rehab program. We'll be speaking to you again another 3 times, and we'll look at different components of the diet in more detail. Thank you very much for listening to me today.